Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, the Flying V edition, where we talk to incredible people who are creating impact and ripples on the pond. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is not a duck, but that's what makes them awesome. Today, my guest is Mike Sazynski. Mike is the Vice President of Colliers Project Leaders. Hailing all the way from Regina, Saskatchewan, Mike is all about rousing enthusiasm, constantly learning, and unlocking the potential in others. Mike and Colliers get to better the pond by creating and building infrastructure for communities. But not only that, he does the same for people too. Thank you, Mike Sazynski, for everything you do to better the pond. All right, Mike Sazynski, you've come in all the way from Regina, Saskatchewan. You're running Colliers Project Leaders. I met you through Tech Canada. I met you twice, actually. And we have to give a shout out to Paul Martin and his groups. And from our conversations and what we had, Mike, and of course you were the winner, but yet again, I know that there's some absolute creative genius that's going to come out of today's podcast. So Mike Sazynski, I want to welcome you to the Better the Pond podcast. It's great to have you.
Great. Thanks so much, Warren. Great to be here. And I did win. I did win big, so I do appreciate it. And thank you and Paul for bringing us together. This is great.
Yeah. So one of the things, talking about like yourself and Colliers of, we really want to get into number one, who you are, because I mean, you're a great guy. That's just enough said. But we ought to find out actually what you're doing to better the pond. So this is going to be a lot of fun today.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. Fun is good.
Fun is good. So before we jump into a lot of the questions, Mike, tell me a little bit about, what you do. Tell me about Colliers.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do a bit of an overview. So Colliers Project Leaders, essentially we're Canada's largest project management and infrastructure advisory firm. So we've been around for over 30 years, started in Ottawa, and now over 30 offices across Canada. We like to say coast to coast to coast, because now we have offices throughout the territories. So we're serving Northern Canada, which is really exciting. And over 700 staff and over 17,000 projects delivered. So it's quite a ride over the last 30 some years. And locally, we've been in Saskatchewan since about 2009. We started to expand into Saskatchewan, and that's where my story with the organization began. And I guess the first big project we got involved in Saskatchewan, I do believe, was the Saskatoon Police Headquarters. And then I got involved in 2012. And now we're up to pushing 20 staff, and pretty interesting to see all the projects and all the exciting things going on in the industry right now, for sure.
Fantastic. Where do you see that going in the future, Mike? 5 years, 10 years down the road with Colliers?
Well, I would just look at, when we start talking about public infrastructure, social infrastructure is the term we start to see. The investment that's happening in infrastructure has been really, really exciting. But as we've seen over the last number of years since COVID, some of the areas that we would see development around schools, post-secondary, the demands on that infrastructure is changing a lot. We're finding that maybe we don't need the bricks and mortar as much, and maybe there's a bit of a movement towards how we're going to reconfigure existing spaces that are out there right now, and what is really the long-term use of some of the bricks and mortar infrastructure out there, which has been exciting to see. But I also know that the infrastructure has really been expanded too, and we start to look at power generation systems. Where's our power going to come from going into the future? What is certain climate policy and government policy going to do to influence the level of investment, and in one sector it's going to be made? So it's really interesting to try to predict the future of infrastructure development is going to be really exciting. Certainly from climate change, we're seeing additional investment happen in adapting certainly our shorelines. We're seeing so many interesting opportunities coming out of how we can protect communities, resilience in communities. And gosh, Maui is a place that's close to my family. We've been there lots, and just unprecedented things that are happening. And so how do we prepare communities? I would really say, I don't know if that's answering the question, Warren, but when I start to look at us as an organization and the things that we're going to be doing going into the future, It's not going to be just building schools, building hospitals. Certainly those things will always be there, but the demands of public infrastructure are really going to expand.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting what you say. You really got my attention was saying about with building up with the whole bricks and mortar piece, right, and how that's changing and actually redesigning the way that things work. And I mean, obviously, COVID was a really prime experience where we saw that the bricks and mortar weren't quite as important as we really thought they were. And
Yeah.
what piece? How do you see Colliers playing a role in that piece? I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, well, I think when we started looking at the size of our organization, the experiences we're bringing, we certainly have across the board of our talent, we have exposure to so many different industries to help our clients move in that direction to kind of support whatever the growth is going to be. When we start to look at introducing new technologies into some of the infrastructure that exists and the demands on future infrastructure, it's pretty interesting. Like I said earlier, talking about some of the changes we're starting to see in readiness within communities and emergency response planning, and having communities really ready to react to these changing environments that we're working in. That certainly is an area of, I don't want to look at it as an area of growth. I would look at it as an area, because we don't want to look at these things as being opportunities to grow, but rather how do we support people so we can avoid some of these things and not have some of the rebuild efforts going on, but how do we contain some of these things that are going to happen, be it flooding, be it fire, be it, you name it. Over the last number of years, we've been heavily involved in water treatment plant upgrades and wastewater treatment facilities throughout communities across Canada. We have a few offices that are within First Nation communities to support them. So there's so many areas that I don't want to look at it as growth, but opportunities where we can support communities that have just greater levels of demand that have been put on and that have never been there before.
That's funny. I didn't know. I was not aware that you were into wastewater treatment plants and infrastructure and those kind of things. I thought you were more honestly on in the bricks and mortar side of buildings. So that's really fascinating that you're in a much bigger capacity and more importantly, I guess, which is bettering the pond is supporting community.
Yeah, well, that kind of answers the question, I guess, right, Warren? When we started to talk about it, I think people had always thought, and we certainly imagined ourselves years ago as being more bricks and mortar, more physical assets, but just already responding to the changing environment that's happening out there, and the levels of spend and the levels of just need and requirements within communities that there's an never-ending list of communities that still are without safe drinking water. So supporting them and trying to find ways to unlock that opportunity and bring critical infrastructure into communities is something that we're pretty excited about as an organization to support.
You think about it for a second. Here we are in 2023, and there's communities that don't have safe drinking water. That just blows my mind.
Yeah, here and not that far away in some instances. So it's a frightening prospect, and certainly where we can support, we are, and we're excited to be involved for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad that you are. Fantastic. All right, so there's not all about bits and pieces about Colliers project leaders. Fantastic. So Mike, let's get into let's talk about you. So what got you from being a gosling, and I mean like where you were hatched, like your very beginnings. Where did you start from to leaving the nest? And when I say leaving the nest is where you took off on your own, and either that was something that you chose to do or something that you may have been kicked out of the nest. Who knows? We'll find out. And to where you are today, Mike. So Mike Sazynski, what is your backstory?
The true story, yeah. So it was a cold Wednesday, and December 27th. I mean, I could go way back, but yeah, a long story. But if when I think about, when I get asked that question, I think about it. I always default back to, and I think about high school. I was born and raised in Regina. I've lived in Regina my whole life, so I could start there. But as I think, about career and choices, that's a fascinating time in high school, isn't it? And that's where you kind of have to start thinking about your path and where you wanted to go. And I told you earlier that my dad was a contractor. He'd worked in construction his whole life, And by default, by force, whatever you want to say, I worked with Dad in the summer throughout high school, and probably broke all the rules out there in terms of workers' compensation, whatever. But you do what you got to do when you're young. And I worked with Dad, from the time, probably 13, 14, 15 years old, helping, supporting, doing things in the yard, building forms in the yard, all sorts of fun and exciting things. And that was my introduction into the construction industry. And he himself was a third generation builder, I guess you could say, contractor. And so he and I really enjoyed that work. And my grandpa had done that work, and my brother, I have an older brother, he was involved in it. So working with hands and doing things was something of real interest. However, when that wasn't very exciting in the winter, and it wasn't very exciting when it was really, really intense physical labor. And it was Dad that said, you enjoy this type of work, but there's probably a different path to being involved without having to do what I'm doing, which at the time, in his 50s, crawl around pouring concrete. And I didn't fight it. I agreed with him right there on the spot. And he actually had introduced me to a number of people who had worked either as engineers or as engineering technologists on construction projects to which he was developing. They're either drafts people or project managers. I thought, well, this is really interesting. And so he connected those dots for me. And my guidance counselor in grade 11 picked it up and said, well, there is this program, Architectural Engineering Technology, I call it, at the time. And it was through SciAS. So I sound like my dad, who called Moose Jaw, STI at the time or whatever, and then now Sask, then SciAS, and then now Sask Poly. So I'm always a generation behind what it's really called. But yeah, I started out there, and there was through the introduction through there, and that was really my leaving the nest, I guess you could say, was a 40-minute drive down the street. But that was the start, going to Moose Jaw and pursuing that program. And it was really interesting because it allowed me to stay in the program, stay in the industry, but not so much using my hands in the physical labor side of things, but having exposure to designing things, understanding the nature of building codes, how things work together. And I just love that program. I stayed involved in that program in some capacity from an advisory committee, and I do the odd presentation from time to time out there, and we certainly are active hiring co-op students out of it. So a great program that I really believe in. And that's really where the story, I guess, took off, is going there and met my wife out there. So all sorts of good things happened when I left the nest, and it was a great experience. And then after I graduated from Moose Jaw and that program, I started with provincial government, and then that's where things started to happen again, because it was really interesting going to school. And I think we could all relate to this. When you go from high school to any kind of post-secondary, I think there's this desire to pursue mastery of whatever it is you're pursuing. And the only way to excel your career is to be really good at that one thing. And that competitive nature in me was certainly there in school. But then when I graduated, I thought that was the finish line. And looking back, that was really the starting point. So then I started a career, and you show up at my first day on the job, which was May 7th, 2001. If I can remember. And I showed up, and I thought, wow, I actually know nothing. I'm starting, and I have a lot to learn. And so it was pretty humbling, but what a great group that I had around me. And that was with the Saskatchewan Environment Resource Management, where we had a design and implementation role to see all the investments in provincial parks. So developing all the infrastructure in the provincial park system in Saskatchewan, which was awesome. We got to do lots of great things, and just a great group of people. And through that exposure, I saw so many great people, and there was some really strong leaders there that just found ways to get people really aligned and get people moving forward through a common goal, that I started to say, well, but that guy doesn't even know everything there is about construction, yet he knows how to work with people really, really well. So then that's where I kind of took that pivot from technical mastery to actually the ability to work with people, the ability to rouse enthusiasm. That's something. And the people that do that seem to have greater career growth and opportunity. So then that was kind of the evolution that I started to see. And then I worked with Ministry of Education, a similar type of role with all of the school development in the province. And then in 2012, I started with Colliers. So here we are 11 years later, and started as a senior project manager, and I've now been the vice president for 5 years, leading the Saskatchewan operations, and it's been a great ride. How's that for my whole story?
That's now I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into the story. So that was a great
Sure.
story. I love the background, and now we're gonna go right to the very back. So right to the very beginnings, actually, should I say, is so you were born and raised in Regina.
Correct.
Correct. All right. And what about you talked a little bit about your dad being in construction, so third generation, so that goes back obviously. But what about your mom? What did your mom do?
Yeah, well, parents are so influential, right? And my mom certainly was a huge influence on my life in an early age. And one of the interesting things that happened is she was a real cheerleader, and really encouraged both my brother and I and my dad to always pursue things. And she was a real driving force behind us in not settling for things, always trying to better yourself and move forward. And she was a great lady, and she unfortunately passed away when I was 18. So when I start to think of some of those pivotal moments that happen, when you're 18, that's a big, there's a lot of things going on in life, and so that was a big thing that really shook our whole family. Obviously, she had a long battle with cancer, and but with all those experiences, it kind of just reshapes perspective, and pushes you in different directions, I think. And but mom was very influential, and to this day is still influential, because I think back, and lots of great memories, obviously, and lots of great stories. And so yeah, she was very influential, and then and so was dad, and in his own way. And dad, unfortunately, he passed away 2 years ago. So yeah, so my brother and I are here carrying the torch forward, I guess you could say.
So it's just you and your brother.
Yeah, older brother who's construction. So we stay in our path. We're keeping up the family in terms of staying in the construction world. So he and I, he's more on the hands-on side. So it doesn't matter what I achieve if I can't build a set of stairs in 5 minutes, then I still have never achieved anything. So we always laugh and give each other a rough time. That's going back to dad. I don't know, Warren, how familiar you are with the whole scene in the construction world, but it's always kind of, there's our hands-on builder types, and then there's the office engineering types, and there's always this good creative tension that happens, and everyone works together. But my brother, dad, and I always had that good competitive nature, let's say. Oh, you don't know how to build this stuff. Yeah, you can draw it, but you can't build it now. Yeah. And then we would always have a good debate about it. But that's just how we worked.
And so imagine all that. So there's like the debate, the tension, but yet the end result is great, right? You design it, they build it.
That's right. We work together, and that really is the teamwork piece that comes together. Is that if everyone's combined, or if everyone's aligned to a common goal, then good things are going to happen. And I look, and both my dad and my brother are just very, very talented in what they do and how they do things. And we would come together and work on stuff. My brother built a house in 2008. Yeah, 2008, around there, 2008, 2009, and I worked together with him on it to some extent. I showed up when there was easy work to be done, and usually around the lunch hour, I showed up to help out. But we worked together, and it was great. And those are good things. Those were good days.
Awesome, I love it. What was going back to when you were a kid? Your first job in construction? Is that where you started actually working?
Yeah, it was. I don't know if working would imply you get paid, right? Well, I was
you were putting in labor.
I was putting in labor. The pay was in developing skills, not so much monetary. How's that? But working with dad, honestly, working with him, probably 13, 14 years old. There was a paper route sprinkled in there too, and then working at gas stations. But developing those skills, certainly working with dad in the construction world.
So you started when you were 13 is when you actually started going into the work world and learning how things work on that side of things.
Yeah, and that was fun times because I remember I was maybe a little bit older, maybe 15, 16. And I remember we were doing an office renovation, and Dad showed me how to paint, and this is how you do it. We just finished a new office, and I was painting, and one of our clients came around the corner and said, "Oh, geez, I didn't know you guys were working." And he said, "Oh, so how long have you been a painter for?" And I thought, we're going to get in trouble. And Dad said, "About 20 minutes. And for the amount you're paying him, I'd say it's a pretty good deal." So everything, he had my back, and you know what? If anything needed to be fixed, he was there to support me, and we always got it through. But that's how we rolled.
Nice. I love it. Looking back to when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I was pretty aligned to this type of work from an early age, I would say. I think because of the exposure that, building and construction was just always part of the family. And I was really interested in being an architect. When I was young, I really liked the idea of how do buildings come together, and why does it look this way and why does it look that way. And Dad being in the industry, he knew a lot about it, and he made some introductions. And I actually, around that time, 13, 14, I remember talking to some of the people that were friends of his that worked in the field, that were architects or engineers or technologists, draftspeople, and kind of getting to know. And then I think just through some of the early interaction, I started to kind of see what that really was and what that was going to be. And I will, full disclosure, Warren, you won't believe it, but I was not an accomplished student in my high school years. And so that limit.
Oh, I find that hard to
That's,
believe.
I know. Yeah. So I was that limited choices. So I didn't come out with real high averages, and so I wasn't really keen on schoolwork. I will admit that changed later in life. I'll tell you, but in high school I wasn't really into it. I really wanted to get into something again that I could kind of get in and maybe get out, but still be in the industry. And that's where I really heard about this program that I ended up going to, and it kept me in the industry, but maybe a little bit on the sideline of where I thought myself. But yeah, I went through this whole iteration of architect, engineer, and then technologist, and it all worked out quite well.
I love it. One of the things you said earlier, I want to jump on this before I jump to my next question with you. But I think about be going into architecture and design and those kind of things, and typically, and I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but typically, the general rule of thumb is those people are there, they're in a box, or they're in their office, and they're building structure. And what you said was really interesting, is that yes, that's what you did, but you got into the position or the place where you could arouse enthusiasm, was your words. And so where did you learn that from? Where did that come from?
Well, yeah, I had a couple of really interesting and effective leaders that I worked with that there'd be some folks that maybe were very focused, diligent practitioners, and that was great, and we needed them on our team. And then there would be other people that were inspiring and really got you excited about what we're working towards, and this is why we're doing this, and this is how great it's going to be, and can you imagine when we build this and the people show up, the looks on their face, that's what's going to motivate you to come to work every day and to create that. And it's just like, yeah, it is. And so I would say, having some of those people around and working with some of those people were really inspiring to me, and seeing that. And then through that journey, I got introduced to a few. I had one of the guys I worked with who was a colleague. I didn't report to him, but he was a colleague who come from the military, and he introduced me to a few different leaders in the military that I thought, wow, and then I stumbled across a book, and I all of a sudden I was 23 years old, flipping open the first real book I'd ever really read, front to back. I skimmed through in high school to get through things, but I wasn't an avid reader at the time. And starting to see some of these things that happen in leadership, and maybe from a military perspective, and how that is applicable to business and anything. And that's where I started to hear some of those terms and some of those concepts, and that people who really took some of those characteristics on all of a sudden started to be more in leadership positions, not the people who just had kind of the technical proficiency. And I thought, well, that was really interesting. and I saw it, I saw it in front of me.
That's really interesting. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you're gonna, well, and we'll talk a little bit about this, sort of about your idea of building teams, but obviously, giving people something to believe in and hitting them on an emotional impact is such a differentiator for sure.
For sure it is.
Yeah. All right. So, what is the greatest thing that's happened to you? And this can be positive or negative. So, what's the greatest thing that's happened to you, Mike, that's ruffled your feathers, and how did you respond to it?
Yeah, interesting. Well, it's funny because I'm like, geez, why would birds even ruffle their feathers? I was thinking about it, and it could be around water, it could be around dominance, intimidation, to impress people. So it's funny, man. I always like, Warren, how everything is kind of tied back to nature, and I really like that. And then I thought about it. I thought, well, I think really the question comes from a place of, and I think you just talked about, is adversity or challenges that I might have faced, and how I learned from them. And there's a lot to pick from. So some of the things I would think about is maybe even the answer kind of lying within the question in some respects, where really about adversity and how to be resilient. And I think I developed resilience at an early age. I shared the story from a personal perspective. Like everyone's lost someone close to them. And my parents, and when my mom passed away when I was 18, in those early years, like it was just, it was obviously devastating. And how to pick up and figure this all out, and understanding and the legacy who my mom was, and the things she had taught me, trying to, that really shook me up quite a bit. And but it also helped develop other skills, I guess you could say, along the way. And then professionally, I think that the things that I've found that have really, I guess, ruffled the feathers, or things that I've really learned from, is just taking risks and not just trying to be safe, have been things that I think I've really tried to embody. I think that, and too, just the realization that no one really owes you anything, and nothing is guaranteed. And there's this feeling sometimes that I see, that that's kind of this, I'm here, therefore I get. Like, I graduated. Where's my, come on, where's my job? I'm done now. And it's like, well, it doesn't really work that way. And I had to learn that. You're the world's a competitive enterprise, and you gotta take some risks, and try to find your own path, and realizing that no one really owes you anything. And I know, if I could really boil it down to one really interesting thing that happened to me that really, I think changed where I was going, was from a professional perspective. And you'll like this one, Warren, is that I had an executive coach that I worked with way back when I didn't even know that such a thing even existed. And I tried to get it through my mind what an executive coach was, and if it was just someone showed up with a gray sweatsuit and a whistle and were going to yell at me, I had no clue. But I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity, and I was okay with my role. I was generally satisfied with the things I was doing at the time. Great people I was with, but everyone finds that at some point in their career. And he was really good at talking to me and asking me questions, and finding that I actually had the solution within me. He just asked me a series of questions to get there. And then it was through that experience that I found that, well, what I really need to do, and the things I need to do, is I need to go back to pursue a greater reading and education. I felt this thing over my head where I hadn't really pursued a certain level of education, and it bothered me to some extent for some weird reason. Like, I felt I needed to do that, and I felt like I needed to be involved in maybe a different thing, and a different environment. And I never would have come to that conclusion if not for being involved in that coaching session for a number of months. Well, almost a year probably. That in itself was stepping out of my comfort zone. Like, could you imagine, for a guy, like, it was something I wasn't too sure what I was getting into, but even accepting and going that direction was a really good thing. And then having the opportunity to talk to him a lot and spend some time with him to really understand what the things are that I wanted to do, what motivated me, what made me excited about getting up every day. And that was a real change. So that could have ruffled the feathers, positive, negative, otherwise, but it was a real good experience. When I look back over my 23 years in my career, that would be a change for sure.
When you looked at getting that coach, was that someone that was provided to you, or was it a choice you made to have, or was it both?
No, it was someone that was working with the ministry I was with at the time, and it was an opportunity provided to a few folks, which was a great opportunity from our deputy at the time.
Mm.
And yeah, so I was matched with this gentleman, and kind of said that's the way it was going to be. And I thought, oh my God, what is this going to look like? And again, it was such a great thing. I became a real advocate of coaching in general as a result of that experience.
Isn't it interesting though how you said that you already had the answers within you. It was just a series of questions to help you get there.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. And my wife is a coach, and she's went through a lot of coaching, and she's been on a really interesting journey. And I see it, and we talk about, like, yeah, that's actually what it's all about. And I don't know how, I don't know that a lot of people even know that opportunity exists, but it's really good because no one's telling you what you should do. It's asking you a series of questions to get to the solution yourself, which makes it that much more satisfying or impactful for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had multiple coaches at different aspects of my life, and some of my biggest shifts or ahas have come from those times.
Mm-hmm.
So should we give, here's a great opportunity. Should we give Candace a shout out? Talking about
Sure,
coaching?
we should.
Let's give
Yeah.
Candace a shout out. Go for
Hello,
it,
Candace Sazynski. Well, I mean, Candace is yeah, she works with provincial government, has been there for a long time, so that is her role. And but very very effective. And I'm her best client. How does that sound? Yeah, no, very effective. And I appreciate some of the perspective that comes, because that, like you said, Warren, it's about asking the series of questions that kind of gets you to where you need to be, that you didn't know you had within you. And
Yeah.
again, that's why I always look at it as being kind of a really interesting thing. And so, yeah, no, she's been great and highly effective in the coaching world for sure. And that was one of the things we just did. I was telling you earlier, is that we went this summer to on a little bit of a journey, and went to Vancouver Island, and we went to Royal Roads, where she went to school for the executive coaching program, and saw the big castle, and it was really interesting. And so it was nice to see that experience for sure.
Yeah, awesome. It's funny that I was talking earlier about how the answers are already in you. So your answers are hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, pretty much it.
Yeah. All right. So Mike, so did you know, actually you do know, because that I've spoken to your groups before, but so geese fly 71% more faster and more efficient when flying in the V formation than flying alone. So what do you think the secret is to getting a team flying in the V formation? What are your thoughts?
Well, that's great, and it is an interesting stat, and we have talked about it before. Now, one thing I didn't share with you, Warren, is that my family are big, builders, contractors. We're also big hunters and goose hunters. We hunt geese a lot. So I don't know if that qualifies or disqualifies me.
We're going to
Yeah.
can we stop this podcast now?
Well, I don't hunt anymore, so there's my qualifier. That I say.
Okay.
But yeah, but you know what? The
Friends
interesting
on.
thing is, I think hunters and all these folks, I mean, they're avid. They're really interested in wildlife. Let's put it that way. So something I've known a lot about with geese. It's really interesting how they work together. And so to answer the question about what the secret of getting a team to fly in a formation, for me, what I've seen and what I've experienced is when a leader or someone has that ability to clearly articulate a vision and a purpose to people within an organization or within a team, having that clarity and that ability to really articulate a clear vision. It sounds easy, but it's not as easy in practice. It's sometimes not that easy. And then reinforcing everyone's role in pursuit of that vision and empowering them to deliver on it. I think, to me, those are the things that really make sense. And through tech, where we had met, there was a speaker a number of years ago that introduced a bunch of folks to a book. I'd known about it before, but that book Endurance, about Ernest Shackleton, and it's one of the great stories that it blows me away that it's not as common a knowledge as it is. But you talk about how to get people to fly in a V formation and around alignment. And he was a guy who recruited I think it was 28 people back in 1914 based purely on temperament and character, all over technical ability, with the promises of getting them on a boat, leaving the UK and sailing and traversing across Antarctica in 1914. And who would want to do that? And he was very straightforward with the risks involved, but he had everyone there, and he had all these chores that were distributed across officers and seamen and socialized, and everyone was broke down all of these traditional hierarchies. But their boat got stuck, and they were lost at sea in Antarctica in the ice for some 19 months or some crazy statistic, and no one died. And it was just such an amazing story of how everyone, of obviously of survival, but I think really the whole lesson there is around leadership and keeping people inspired and motivated to a common goal, which at that point was survival. And when morale was really low and people thought they were at the end of the line and death was certain, he organized a big soccer game out in the middle of the frozen tundra, and they played soccer for, he just did all these interesting things and kept people really, really aligned. So, I mean, to me, there's a really, really rich lesson in alignment through that book.
And how do you see yourself playing that out in your role at Colliers, Mike?
Yeah, good question. I certainly I don't have all the answers. I have a lot to learn. I think that I'm committed to continue to learn, which is probably what I would suggest is my greatest asset. Is I never think I have it figured out. I'm always trying to trying to find the ways to do that a little bit better. For me, I think it really comes down to being honest with people, working with people closely, not bringing a big ego into things, but to really get people on, like, why are we getting up every day, and what does it matter if we do this project or that project? What's it really about? And we're really trying to talk a lot to our teams more about, as I said earlier, around what is the impact we're trying to make in communities. And I think if we approach things more from an emotional standpoint and not just a transactional perspective, I think that goes a long way to building alignment. That we're actually trying to improve communities. We're trying to make it better for people. And when we distill it to that level, I think it makes it a lot more impactful.
Yeah, and you said about earlier, as clearly articulating a vision or a direction or a purpose, and actually going into why are we doing this versus what are we doing? So it's the why versus the what. I think it's sort of what I could sort of summarize from what you said. And and as VP of Colliers, do you see your responsibility to make that happen over top of the entire the entire organization, or just with what you're doing here locally in Saskatchewan?
Well, I think that they've crossed both lines. Like, I think my responsibilities are that very much of within Saskatchewan, but as a leader within the organization, it's certainly not limited to our borders. So we all work together across our entire leadership team across Canada, and try to bring ideas of how to do that on a more national, even on a global perspective. We have offices in the UAE and Saudi Arabia too. So we have a global presence. Colliers as a brand is all over the world. But our offices are obviously more focused in Canada, but we do have operations in the Middle East, and so a global perspective. But we're working on lots of exciting things where we all have an opportunity to influence what we're doing in other provinces, all aligned to the common goal of what we're trying to achieve as an organization.
I love it. So now, Mike, what are you doing right now to better the pond? What ripples are you creating out there, and how are you inspiring others to do the same?
Yeah, interesting. Well, for me, as I said earlier, individually, I'm trying to always learn and develop, try to find new things and learn from others, and never feeling that I know it all. I certainly won't be in that position. But I think one of the things I'm really trying to find is to afford people the same opportunity that was provided to me. I offered that overview of the coaching experience, and trying to bring that together with some individuals, just so people have that opportunity to unlock their potential. And challenging people, I think, a little bit, but also, trying to invest in people so that they have that opportunity to grow to that next thing, or get exposure to that next opportunity, and really empower individuals to take that step forward, and to challenge people, and to find reasons to keep giving new challenges. And obviously doing what I said I was going to do is a pretty important piece of the puzzle too. And I think one of the things that we've really done that kind of works its way down from our leadership team to myself and to others is, delegation and empowerment are two really important things. And there was a period of time when I was really worried that delegating things meant I was just trying to avoid doing something. And I think that there was a point in time where I started to really discover that by not delegating things, I was robbing people of the opportunity to take that next step and move up. Something that might have been, I've done it before, I'm going to, I don't want to do it right now, which was never my perspective. But giving people the opportunity, if someone's only been with an organization, they're 2 years out of school, they've never had the chance to do things like this before. So by delegating appropriately, giving people tasks that are encouraging them to stretch a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, to me is a real key to growth. So our view of delegation empowerment is changing a lot, and I think it's a conduit to growth and a meaningful career opportunity for people, for sure.
I think that is absolutely an incredible point. When you say about, delegation, right, is that if I don't delegate, I'm robbing the other person of an opportunity that they might otherwise have had. And I think it's a really, really valuable point for people to actually really grab and hang on to.
Yeah, well, because I've seen it too when I was young, working in an organization, maybe not even young, but maybe inexperienced in the sector or the project or whatever the case may be. I would see people doing something that like, geez, like, I know that seems like a little thing, but can I do that? I've never done it before. And when you do it, then you have the opportunity to say you've done it, and you're only one experience away from being an expert in anything. So it's great to have those opportunities, but the willingness of leaders to let go and allow people and empower and support, those would be things I'm really trying to focus on in my journey. And always room for improvement, but those would be areas that I'm really excited to do more of.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I do talk when I'm speaking to groups and I talk a little bit about delegation, is, like, don't get in your own way. Don't think that you're the only one, right? I always say, like, for people, trust until you can't. And right. And let them show you that they're capable, and that builds trust, but it also builds, in that person, now you're helping them build confidence. And with confidence is growth.
Yeah, and everyone wins, right? When it starts to go, everyone wins. And I think one of the other things I think that I was just going to share when I thought about this was, at some point in my career, I think in a lot of people's career, you kind of go from this perspective of success is the things that I do and I achieve, and I feel good about the things I do, to I'm less excited about the things I do and I'm more excited to the achievements of team and team members. And so that shift, when it starts to happen, and not losing focus of it, I think is something that I've really been trying to hone in on, and not just think about it's not my success that matters, it's the team success, or it's the individual that is maybe new to the organization and they had a big win, and celebrating those things. To me, those have been really important things to help better the pond, let's say.
Yeah. I do talk about, I didn't do it in your session, but when I'm working with organizations, I talk about 5 levels of leadership, and level 1 is me, not we. Level 5 is we, not me. And it's a total shift in thinking of what's it really all about, right? If you make it about you, well, it just becomes about you, and no one really wants to partake and wants to play in that sandbox. So shift your thinking to we, not me.
Right. Yeah. But you could see where people, maybe myself, even when May 7th, 2001, I might have said 21. Gosh, I'm not that young. But May 7th, 2001, when I first started, I was very much about me, because I think it's natural that people come out, and depending where you are in your career and your experience, you're going to have a little bit more of a selfish view of the world, because you're trying to differentiate yourself, right? So, but as you grow in your role, you can't have that. That's a bad formula.
Yeah, exactly. No, you definitely see that in the younger years. So hopefully you'll learn it sooner than later. So, Mike, what's one lesson that you've learned along your journey that you would share with an entrepreneur starting a business today?
Well, gosh, where do I start? I talked quite a bit about that willingness to learn and make mistakes. Like again, I look at that and just say all the good things I think that I've been fortunate enough to have in my career, in my industry, is whenever I've just went a little outside of the comfort zone and been willing to take calculated risk. But that bit you heard the saying before about the biggest risk is never taking one. And I think that when I look back, the achievements I've had have been the things that I went just a little outside. And so I would always be encouraging people to make, to take calculated risk, get outside of your comfort zone a little bit, being humble and willing to learn from others, and certainly doing a scan and understanding, who's done it before and building a network. The other thing that I haven't talked about before now, and what brings us together too, is the power of a network. And one of the things that happened for me at a younger age is I had the opportunity to work with a professional association, Technology Professionals Saskatchewan, TPS, where I was afforded the opportunity to be on the board of directors and just to see how things work outside of my regular 8 to 5 kind of a job from a board governance perspective was fascinating. I went on to be the president of that association for a couple of years. And actually, that's why I'm in this. That's generally how I'm in this role, is through the network that was established. People knew this person, people knew that person, I knew this. And I would say for an entrepreneur, that is absolutely critical, is to create and leverage a network. It's so important, and not just be hiding in the background, expecting the world will just fall to you. That would be my one big thing. And I often, some of the people closest to me know I talked about the Ernest Shackleton story. The other hero, I guess I would say, that I get such a kick out of, I read about, is good old Warren Buffett, who I think he just had a birthday, so he's deep in his 90s now. But I'd watched a few presentations where he would speak to students at Columbia University, I think it was, which is where he had done his MBA, and he would speak to the students, and he had a challenge. He'd say, I want you to do a scan in this classroom, and I want you to think about, if you could pick the 10% of the future earnings of any one of your classmates, who would you pick? And he said, I'll write down on a piece of paper why you would pick them, and what is it about them? Is it because they have the highest marks, or what is it? And obviously it's the people that could, going back to arouse enthusiasm, they know how to work with people. And so he did this exercise, and he said, now look around the room and say, who are the people that you would bet against, you would short in the stock language? Who would you short their future earnings against, or who's the most likely to fail? Write down their characteristics. And he said the good thing is that you could look at that list and you could embody all of those characteristics on the left and avoid those ones on the right. And hopefully you would see that the person you want to invest is yourself. And to me, it's just a really interesting but very simple exercise that I think would have perfect utility with an entrepreneur starting out, and doing a similar type of an exercise would be really, really interesting. And then beyond that is obviously, pursuing something you're passionate about, number one, not just the thing that's going to make you the most money, but something you're really passionate about, because the money will come.
Yeah, the money is a strategic byproduct.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. So I have one more question here for you, Mike, that I did not give you, and so we're going to set you up here a little bit. So here's the question, Mike. If you were standing on the top of a mountain and the whole world was intently listening to you, what would you say?
Oh my God. I'm totally off script. What did I rate high in my
Your fact finder follow through, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'll get back to you tomorrow. How's that sound? Well, what would I say? That's a really interesting question. I think I've said it a bit now, but being willing to learn, and never being content that you just know everything. You actually don't know a lot about anything, and to continue to learn, and continuing to learn would be really, really important, I would say. And again, as I said earlier about, anything is attainable to anyone, and to never just expect it to fall in your lap. There's so many stories of people that have had nothing and have created so many great things. And those are such inspiring stories. And, anyone could be any one of those stories 20 years from now, 10 years from now. So I don't know. I would have to work with a writer to create a statement, Warren, but that's some of my brainstorming. How's that sound?
I love it. Yes, I want to know what to shoot from the hip.
Yeah, right.
um, no, that's fantastic, and I can really tell from this conversation too, and from knowing you earlier, Mike. I mean, you're just a lifelong learner, and but I think there's also there's a lot to be said for being humble and not getting stuck so much in your ego that you think you know everything. And so that, I mean, when you're always open to learning, you're open to opportunity, you're open for discussion, you're open for feedback. That's that's where growth lies.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I would say, Warren, right there.
Okay. All right. I'll script that for you. Then you can give it back to me.
Yeah, right. Perfect. Yeah. Trademark that one.
So one thing I want to say, Mike, is to kind of wrap this up before we go. And, what I love doing is really listening to people and people like yourself, Mike, who are bettering the pond. You're making the world a better place. You're constantly contributing. And I listen to talk about, your arousing enthusiasm. I listen about how you explain about how to build teamwork, and flying the V formation, how to inspire entrepreneurs. And from listening to all that and then tying it back to your mom, right, who was a cheerleader, she's a driving force, and always about bettering things.
Jeez.
I'm kind of seeing a theme here, right? And then your dad's work ethic.
Well, you know what, Warren, I've no one's ever tied it back together as neatly as you just did. But I would say you hit the nail on the head pretty good there. Yeah, that's good.
So you just get to carry it.
Confirmed. I can confirm the statement.
You can confirm it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. No, you know what? That's very accurate. That's very accurate. But isn't it interesting how, as I said earlier, yeah, how influential, obviously we all know that parents are, but I think you just summarized and demonstrated it. Yeah, bingo.
Love it. So, Mike Sazynski, I really want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for winning, the prize to be on the Better the Pond podcast. I really want to thank you for your stories. I want to thank you for everything that you're doing to better the pond. People want to find you. Where do they go?
Well, I seem to be anywhere and everywhere. So I'm a big supporter on LinkedIn. I'm very involved in conversations and posting the odd things on LinkedIn. So, if people are interested in connecting, I would say let's start there, and I'd be happy to learn more about people. That'd be listeners out there, and whatever I could learn from people would be great.
So we'll make sure that we get that link in the show notes. So if people want to reach out to Mike, it's very easy to do so, and hit the click the link, reach out to Mike Sazynski on LinkedIn, and start a conversation.
Great. And I'm always, and Colliers Project Leaders is where I'm at. So on the corner of McIntyre and 11th Avenue, always ready to roll.
In Regina, Saskatchewan.
Yes, you bet.
We got to put that out there. So, all right. So there you have it, folks. It was a great time here today on the Better the Pond podcast with Mike Sazynski, and this is Warren Barry, and I'm flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond, because we're better together. Thank you so much, Mike.
Great. Thanks, Warren.